So I watched on Instagram a video of Kamala Harris talking about how she wants to cap what people are going to pay for childcare, and she wants to go towards universal pre-K. Big problem with both of those. Now, why? Well, universal pre-K, horrible idea. In fact, I'm on the Early Childhood Iowa State Board of Directors. That's something that Governor Kim Reynolds appointed me to, and it's a 3-year term. And if I do nothing else except stop universal pre-K, I'll be pretty happy. So, what is universal pre-K? Well, childcare, so 0 to 5, so before school starts, that's pre-K. So, universal pre-K. Okay, why would we want to do that? Well, the government has not done a great job with public education. Have they? Have they? Well, let's see. 33% proficiency in a lot of categories. And just, that's a whole topic in and of itself. The government does a horrible job. They do not steward that well. Now, we have individual teachers that are incredible, absolutely stellar. I know some of them myself. I know many of them myself, and I've met lots of them. And so teachers are amazing. Not all of them, okay? We got some kind of wacko going on in some places, but the administration has exploded. You know, in Iowa, we have had the same population for the last 40 years, and the education budget has just grown astronomically, and we don't have more teachers, okay? Even if you adjust for inflation, it's still growing astronomically. We don't have more teachers. What do we have? More administrators. That's more waste, okay? And they've taken over, and it's the same thing in universities, but we'll stick with the primary education before university. And after, I mean, it's just it's going the Marxist route. I mean, it's just government indoctrination. They're not even teaching history the way it should be taught. They're not even teaching the founding fathers in America anymore. I've talked about this on a previous episode. And they're not teaching the real Civil War. They're just not teaching the truth. And we need to be teaching the truth. And if anybody has their kids in public school, they need to be supplementing it with all of these things and be very aware and hyper focused and in the details of what's being taught there, and having good relationships, close relationships with the educators so that they know, and then need to have their kids be sharing with them every day what they're learning. And then if there's problems, you can correct that. Now, okay, so I said the problem with universal pre-K. Horrible idea. Get the government out of all of that. You do not want the government to get into that. Education and childcare is a market that can regulate itself, okay? We don't need, people will see the results, people talk, people are able to handle that themselves. Okay, now, she wants to cap childcare expenses, okay? Now, there's a couple of factors here. My wife and I own a childcare, okay? So I'm inside this. I've went through all the administrative stuff to get the daycare set up. I do all the administrative, the back end. I've actually go through all the same training as well to be a provider myself, but I'm not. I don't do that. My wife does that. But I have all the training. I know all the details behind it, whether it's a center or an in-home daycare or a child development home, that sort of thing. Okay, she wants to cap childcare at $10 a day. $10. I'm sorry. You got to be kidding me. Okay, so what does that mean? If people are only going to pay $10 a day, where's that revenue going to be made up so that somebody can have a job? Well, I suppose she thinks the government's going to pay for it, which is absurd, because that's one way that we can ensure there's a lot of waste and low quality in there. Because the thing is, she says, high quality, affordable childcare. Now, I talked about this in 2020 in my campaign for the Iowa House of Representatives. High quality and affordable. That's what we want. And that's one of the things I campaigned on. But it's not just about capping revenue so that people don't have to pay to make it affordable. I mean, yes. But the thing is, my wife and I talked about this too. I mean, it's kind of conflicting, because really, ideally, one of the parents would be with the kids all day. and raising the kids and all that. And that's not always the case. I mean, obviously we have a childcare, so we're not anti any of that. So like we're helping raise the next generation, and we want to be there to supplement where needed in other families and help and all that. And we do educational stuff too. We share lots of stuff with families that partner with us to help educate their children. Now, if you want high quality, okay, we're going to have to pay for it. Now, think about it. Now, if you have children, I'm sure you know how much daycare costs. It can be between $3 an hour, $5 an hour, maybe even more, depending on where you live, per child. And the government now reimburses, okay, there's something called child care assistance. The government reimburses low-income families that can't afford child care, which it's understandable they can't afford child care because it can be very expensive, and thousands of dollars every year for full-time child care. Now, one option is, if they can't afford it, is to not have childcare and have family members help, or have one of the parents, adjust the lifestyle as needed, and have one of the parents stay at home with the children and homeschool and raise the children that way. Now, a lot of people are taking that option. In fact, we even encourage people in our childcare to do that, and we want to help partner with them in doing that. And most don't have full time because they're in our childcare. In fact, nobody does now. But we want to encourage them to spend more time with their families, and so that is one option. And I do know people who have done that have adjusted the lifestyle to make that work. Now, another thing is that when I'm on this Early Childhood Iowa State Board I mentioned, a lot of talk there, it seems like the goal a lot of people talk about is we need to get the government to give us more money. We need to get the government to give more money to child care centers and homes and all that. But the thing is that there's not enough focus on cost. I mean, I don't even, like in my industry, in manufacturing where I work, the industry I work in supply chain and global business, we talk about cost all the time. You don't just raise prices. Now, some industries can do that, but in general, we're always talking about cost, and you got to minimize cost, find ways to do things more efficiently. I expect all the suppliers I work with to have a very deep understanding of their costs. And if they don't, and they ask me for a cost increase, well, it's like, well, why am I going to give you a more cost increase if you don't even understand the costs you have right now? I'm sure you got some waste in there you can get rid of. In fact, part of my job is to help eliminate that waste, and whether that leads to a cost reduction or not, that's another topic. But there's not enough focus on that. Do we really understand the cost structure of providing one more unit of care? One more child comes in, what does that do to the cost structure, the overheads and the budget and all of that? What does that do? Well, we need to be focusing on that. And we can use churches and have them offer those for free. There's all kinds of ways that we can eliminate, that's why eliminate costs, because child care centers have a very high cost of the building, okay? And child care homes, like a child development home, that can have up to like 12 kids in that child care home if you are category B or C, and you can have assistants, you can have all kinds of things, but they have, obviously, the cost of the building is not there, and there's all kinds of write-offs and all that, and it can be very lucrative to have a child development home, but they don't talk about that. And there can be a way to do it to where it's a good price for the parents that it works for, and can be very lucrative for the provider as well if they want to have full-time, 6 kids, 8 kids, 12 kids, depending on what category they're in. So there's one other thing that I wanted to mention before we drop is there's something called child care reimbursement. So child care assistance, CCA. So that's if a family cannot afford the full child care rate, then they get assistance from the government, and that makes sense because it can be very expensive, and so they may get $500 benefit per month or more from the government. But the thing is, that goes directly to the child care, and they do not reimburse at the rates, at the standard rate. So say they charge $5 an hour, the government may reimburse only $3.50 an hour. Now, what does that mean? That means a child care will probably be less likely to take CCA, child care assistance, children that the parents don't pay the full amount because the government doesn't fully reimburse it. How do I know that? Because I used to do grant application reviews for early childhood in my area, and grant applications. One particular child care center, and it's not the only one, but this one I knew of, or that I actually read their application, was to get what's called gap funding, to close that gap, because parents they wanted to. Most child care is capped 10%. 10% of the enrolled children can be on child care assistance, because otherwise they can't afford it, because they don't get reimbursed the full amount from the government. So what they did was the gap funding. So they maybe had 50 or 60% of child care assistance children in that child care, because the government, this gap funding from this nonprofit that I was on the board of, would give gap funding. So would give extra funding to close the difference between that $5 and that $3.50. So it would give $1.50 per child per hour. That's just an example. I'm making that up. But that's basically what it is. It's the gap funding. So then they can provide child care for lower income families and more of them. And so that's one thing that was overcome in Iowa. That was something that we spoke up a lot about. And okay, that's great. That's the government. If the government's going to help with something like that, then they should be doing that. That sort of thing, and reimbursing at the right rates. But that is much different than the government taking over childcare, pre-K, universal pre-K. Imagine, what does that mean? That means 0 to 5, early childhood education. That means that is right exactly what childcare is. Universal childcare, universal pre-K. So don't fall for that. We do not want universal pre-K. And some people may say, well, yeah, but then they can have their job and this and that. And it's like, this is just one more thing that the government to take over. And the government lately, well, the last 30 years, is not problem solvers. The government is problem creators. What the government does is starts a little fire here, and then instead of doing what they need to do to get rid of it, and they maybe get rid of that fire, but actually it starts another one over there, and then they get rid of that one and it starts another one over here. Instead of taking a big picture, take a step back and say, okay, what is the best thing to do? Thinking long term, thinking short term, thinking medium term, and thinking all people groups, not just one people group. What is it that we need to do? And it's not just a campaign slogan. So these are some things that I think about. This is what we need to be aware of. No universal pre-K and no caps on what child care can be charging. Like they're basically just saying, hey, you can only make so much money in this industry. Can you think of another industry where they could say that? Here's the max amount you can charge for an iPhone. Here's the max amount you can charge for a computer. Here's the max amount you can charge for a Bible. Here's a max amount for... It's absurd. It is absolutely absurd. And why there's this carve out in childcare that they think they can talk about this. Why is that? It's important that we know what's really going on here, and the government, this is sort of an opportunity to just shove universal pre-K in there because of this mismatch, instead of actually looking foundationally, what do we need to change to make this industry match a little better and make it work, because we can't just forfeit it to the government. If people can't afford iPhones, we don't cap the cost of iPhones. If people can, and yes, it is a luxury to have childcare sometimes, and not. But I understand there's single parents and they got to have it, but there's a lot of single parents that don't have childcare because they have family support networks and that sort of thing. And there's all kinds of stuff that we need to talk about on this, and I opened a lot of can of worms here, but those are a few things that we need to be thinking about. No universal pre-K and no cap on childcare revenue. Ridiculous.